Welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have as our guest Richard Morris. Hey, Richard.
Hello.
Richard, I've been in these gear groups for a while and kind of seen Richard in passing. And there's one time I had something for sale and Richard
You
bought it from
literally
me.
saw me in passing.
Yeah. Dropped off. I think it was an
That's right.
interface to your mother-in-law's house, and
Yeah,
she lives like in a nearby town, and
Hattiesburg, yes.
yeah, Hattiesburg, and I live in Poplarville,
Hmm.
and dropped it off there. And next time, I'm assuming next time you made a visit there, you just picked it up. But
Yep.
so that was kind of interesting. But we actually haven't met
Hmm.
in real life now. We do have some mutual friends in common. Um,
Hmm.
I know some people I think that you go to church with.
Oh yeah, who's that?
Well, I knew Stacy Clearman.
Oh
He was
yeah.
the worship pastor there,
Oh yeah.
and I've met him a few times. And then your new um, worship leader, Michael
Micah.
Reynolds.
Hmm.
I've met and talked with him several times as well.
Yep.
So yeah, we've got a few mutual friends in common, and
Plus all of our Facebook friends.
plus all our Facebook friends. That goes goes wide and deep there. But
Yep.
we'll kind of get into. I want to go circle back and talk about you playing at your church a little
Hmm.
bit later on, but we'll get there in a minute. Um, I do want to just give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us anything that you want to tell listeners about yourself. Something maybe we don't know, and just give us a little background.
Hmm. Well, I recently resigned as general manager of the universe. I found that wasn't working very well. So, yeah, I resigned that. I did run for president last year.
I saw
It
that.
was a
Yeah.
Yeah, it was it was a low key campaign. It was mostly a result of me. I'm a bit of a news junkie, though I've backed off a whole bunch in the last few months. I would watch these shows, and they would bring on some guy, Rick Santorum, right?
Hmm.
Just to pick a name out of the air, and it would be future or a former presidential candidate. Well, that guy got his butt kicked, and but all of a sudden, because he's former presidential candidate, he has gravitas, you see.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I'm gonna give myself some gravitas. So I ran for president. So now I can be introduced as former presidential candidate.
There you go.
There you go.
But you
Oh,
resigned
mm,
from
general manager
general
of the
manager.
universe.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's got to be a
Uh,
weighty thing to do, anyways.
it, well, it is. And the thing is, well, I'm 55 years old, and I have learned um, it's really hard to talk people into things. And if you do talk them into things, they can be talked out of things.
Hmm.
And you want you want to. I think we all have ideas, ideologies, things that we like to share and impress upon other people. You know, if we think they're valuable, the ideas. But uh, in the end, you got to let people come to their own decisions. You know, they have to live by their convictions.
Yeah.
And you can share information, and if they like it, they like it, and if they don't, they don't. So I just kind of grew up as a real opinionated smart aleck, and have been that way a good part of my life. And you know, God's been dealing with me for a long time about it, and so that's why I've been gradually backing away from being that kind of person.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's always comes a point where we want everybody. We all have our own point of views, and we want
Mm-hmm.
everybody to somewhat some or less share that in some way and understand us. And but we all the truth is that not everybody's gonna see things the same way, and
No kidding.
I've found it's really interesting is I kind of came to a point where Okay, I have my opinion, but um, somebody else's opinion doesn't bother me either. Um,
Right.
and so, and so, I do have strong beliefs about certain things, politically, religiously, but I
Hmm.
found that sometimes the way to make friends and influence people, sometimes that's not got to be the first thing, you know, uh,
Hmm.
go to when I encounter people, and so I'm always trying to find common ground, and of course I'm sure you know all that as well,
Yeah.
but just for the sake of discussion,
Hmm.
um, well, let's go. Let's this podcast is about our musical journeys and
Hmm.
people telling their stories. Last week we had, you mentioned you were 55. Last week
Hmm.
my guest was 52 or 53.
50, 53.
53, and so yeah, it's a different point of view. I'm 32.
Right.
So, and a lot of my guests up to this point until last week, kind of been in the 25 to 35 range. And so, but I like point of views all across the board, and I like you guys that are in your 50s sure have seen a lot of the things you grew up in, a lot of the things that I idolized, anyways, like that point in music culture and music history. A lot of the people I looked up to, these were fresh guys that part of your generation. That
They were contemporary. Yeah.
that was it, and cutting edge. And I think I shared on my first episode about how all the guys around me were listening to punk music and the things that was big in the '90s, and here I was listening to 1970s Southern rock starting out. I mean, that was the biggest influence in my musical journey,
Right.
and so I don't know. I guess I kind of live on a different plane, anyways. So, but tell us a little bit about your story, your musical background.
Well, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, the
Okay.
home of Leonard Skinner.
Oh yeah.
So there I was, born in '61, grew up during the time of, rock and roll going from the '50s kind of rock and roll into the pop music of the '60s, and then, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, Cream, all that sort of stuff. And lots of Motown. We listened to lots of Motown. Uh, there was a lot of Elvis Presley, a lot of Johnny Cash in our
Mm-hmm.
house. We listened to all kinds of stuff, and we were always listening to music, and um, our families would always get together on the weekends. Lots of uncles and aunts and cousins and grandpa and grandma were there, and we'd watch Hee Haw, and then we'd go outside and have a fish fry, and the next thing you know, somebody's playing music, and we're all standing around playing air guitar. So there I was at 5 years old saying, I'm going to be lead guitar. And I had no idea what lead guitar was, but I wanted to be lead guitar. And so that kind of went on into the '70s. And then, uh, I was still listening to pop music. And about the time I turned 14, 15, became a freshman in high school, and I started getting into Aerosmith and Ted Nugent and Bad Company, and what is now called classic rock was just rock then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, I was familiar with Leonard Skinner, and I really got into Rush big time. Uh, Styx and Journey, I like those kind of bands too.
Okay, so more like the
So
progressive, a little bit what's considered progressive rock now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But at the same time, I got saved when I was 12 years old, and so my mom started taking us to church, and um, we would go to Christian concerts. Now, we had moved from Florida to Dallas when I
Okay.
was like 8 years old. And, after my dad's passing, my mom rededicated her life to the Lord. And like I said, we started going to church. And she would take us to these concerts in Dallas, and they would do them once a month, and we would see acts like Barry McGuire, Dallas
Okay.
Home,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. This was early-ish 70s. And I saw Petra when they were a three guitar band way before, what you know of Petra of the 80s. And I guess
Right.
I don't know if
Right.
they're still together, but I saw Phil Kagi way back then. He was with Second Chapter of Acts.
Okay.
And my head exploded. I was like,
Yeah.
I was starting to take an interest in the guitar at that time. And I said, that's it. And then Peter Frampton came out right about that time as well. And I said, that's it. I'm getting a guitar. So that's when I started playing. Uh, so through high school, I was listening to secular music and Christian music, and all the while my mom had remarried, and my stepdad was like, that 4/4 beat is of the devil, and I was like, it is? I didn't know that, which is hilarious looking back now, because even people of that generation, my mom, they listen to Bethel and Hillsong, and and elevation music, worship music.
Hmm.
That's what's in our churches nowadays, So, that whole 4/4 beat thing just kind of fell by the wayside, I guess.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Well, that's very interesting. You touched on that, and I grew up where my dad, that was his era of music. He had a stack of records of all those groups you named.
hmm
I remember just touch on Barry McGuire for a minute. A lot of people don't know him,
no,
but he was a folk singer in the '60s. Right alongside
hmm
Dylan, and
hmm
he became a Christian, and he ended up he had a very rootsy folky sound, and I remember he had this rendition of This Little Light of Mine where he just it's like he Willie Nelsoned it up, but he had a lot more huskier, raspy
yes,
voice than him.
yeah,
But his music sounded a lot like maybe like Willie Nelson or something like that. And
hmm
I remember those groups. Keith Green was big in my house.
hmm
Um, uh, Dallas Home.
Did you have the first Amy Grant album?
No, he didn't have that, but that was a big part of the background, I guess, in my young years.
Right.
I never was a Amy Grant fan, um,
Yeah.
but Dallas Home. I've actually seen Dallas has come to our church a couple times and
hmm
played, and he's really good. I'm trying to think of some of the other groups along that line. Um, David and the
Yeah, a lot of.
Giants.
I never saw them.
Yeah, I never have either, but my dad probably had like 4 or 5 of their records, and they're right here from Mississippi.
Right.
And
Dan Huff, right?
no, not Dan. Dan's well known as a session guitarist, but
Right.
David Huff, and he's a
David Huff.
guitarist as
Okay.
well. And then I think he's got 2 twin brothers, Rayburn and Claiborne, and yeah, they're
A
on.
Southern.
Yeah, and one plays bass, one plays keyboards, and then the guy who was the drummer for them, his name is Keith Thibodeau. He
Right.
was Lil Ricky on I
Little
Love
Ricky. Yeah.
Lucy, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I grew up listening to, instead of Highway to Hell like AC/DC, I grew up listening to Highway to Heaven by
Sure.
David and the Giants, and that's
Yep.
and that's a really cool track, by the way.
hmm
Keith Thibodeau, and I'll post a link when I post this episode, because but the drums on that are absolute killer. He's one of the best drummers around, and I've seen Keith play live and
hmm
with other groups, and he's just amazing.
Yeah.
But we'll get back on topic here in a minute. I don't run into a lot of people who are familiar with those groups.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of my, young formative years. I was listening to those records, and
Right.
I'd sit there and play with my dad's records and spin those.
Hmm.
And
So you were, let me interject. You were saying in the previous interview, I think, about your grandfather being a pastor in Tupelo.
yeah, well, yeah, my grandfather was an Assembly of God pastor, and my dad is too. And actually, his dad was one as well. And
Okay.
he was from the West Tennessee area,
Yeah.
and just pastored a lot of churches through there, and then Arkansas and Mississippi, and anyways, when I was a child, he took a church to pastor in Tupelo.
Hmm.
It's a church that doesn't exist anymore. It was called East Heights,
Hmm.
and I think there's a church named Cornerstone that took them over. But uh, East Heights was the congregation that apparently Elvis's parents went to, and I think there were some name changes, but it was the same people and different property. But I remember him tell us stories about people would drive up and knock on the door while he's there at the office in the middle of the day
Yeah.
and want to come walk through the building and put their hands on the wall so they could feel what Elvis felt. And it's like, well, that's, he never even was in this building. And,
Yeah.
they would look disappointed. And
Yeah.
but that,
Well, the reason I make an issue of it at all is that my wife has family up there in Tupelo. In fact, her daughter lives there, and we go visit all the time. And I've been to the birthplace of Elvis, and
mm-hmm,
all of that. And so my wife's family, they're you're in the assemblies, which is we go to an Assembly of God church, but her family's all Church of God, which it's pretty much the same thing.
right.
But they're from way, way back, they all over the state, Church of God people. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The that house, a lot of people think, oh, Tupelo's cool. And I've been to that house, and it is literally just a two-room shack.
yep.
There's nothing to it.
But that would be typical of a house back then.
Yes,
You know.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's not much to the museum there either. It is kind of
No.
interesting,
Yeah.
but yeah. So that's kind of eh. I could go on and talk for a day about all the musical influence here in Mississippi, and
Hmm.
some of the things I've seen. And how long have you lived in Mississippi?
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
And there's something I want to get to on that because of you've got some background and working for a very notorious company here in
Yes.
Mississippi,
Yes.
and we'll get to that in a minute. But
Uh,
so you were so you moved out to Dallas with your family.
yeah.
Uh, you're you're at the same time you're experiencing this wave of the first wave of contemporary Christian music.
Yes. And so I graduated from high school. I lived in a little town called Duncanville. It's a suburb of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I went straight away to Christ for the Nations. And it was all of my friends, all the guys there were approximately my age, and we were all into Christian rock, and which was a hard thing to be into when there was like four bands, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody introduced me to Resurrection Band, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have found it. And DeGarmo and Key, and those, oh, man, I love those guys. Well, in fact, I know who it was. It was Tim Hoke. You've probably seen his name on some of the forums.
Okay. Now he was in.
He went to Bible school with
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's a really good guitar player.
Huh.
And but anyway, yeah. So we would go to the Christian music store, which was not like going to Lifeway or something like you do nowadays. It's just like an old record shop, and we were just scared, like, man, do you got anything, anything, anything good? And it was slim pickings, and but fortunately, in the later years, we get Third Day and Mercy Me and bands like that. They're really good. I really enjoy that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Um, it was such a. I want to say there was like such a subculture based
Oh
around
yeah.
that whole movement, and
Yes.
it was very interesting. A lot of great music came out of it.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean, I kind of cut my teeth on that, and then about the time that I was really starting to pay attention to music is like some of the guys like Carmen came along,
Mm. Yeah.
and then but then I realized as I got really into music, well, there's better out there than Carmen. Um,
Yeah, he was super talented. Just what really wasn't our cup of tea, was it?
no, no, he was very pop based. But
Yeah.
then I remember there was a group that I absolutely loved, and it was the first CD that I ever purchased.
Mm.
It was Big Tent Revival,
Okay.
and it was like they opened up a world to me, and that's probably why I made the journey to listening to a lot of classic rock
Mhm.
because they had that roots
Yeah.
based. They were a
Yes.
Memphis based group, and
Yes.
then the natural progression was to get into Third Day right after that,
Yeah. Right.
and yeah, they were so just for their time. That was just such a um, groundbreaking thing,
Yep.
and a southern rock Christian band.
Yeah.
It was neat.
Right. Not there aren't very many of those, boy.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Daryl Mansfield. He's
Yeah.
not quite southern rock, but he's real rootsy.
Yeah. Yeah. He can
Up.
tear up
Up.
a harmonica.
Whew. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yep.
And of course, there was some other groups like Andre Crouch and
Oh yeah.
some of those others that were good, but they were a little bit different. They weren't really rock based.
Yep.
But a lot of good music there. So okay, so you're in Bible college. Uh,
Yep.
you're listening to these groups. Then what?
Graduated, and then I was going to go on. I moved to Tulsa because my parents had moved up there,
Mm-hmm.
and they had attended Rhema for a year, Rhema Bible College.
Okay.
And I had a mind to go, but it didn't work out. And so I just kind of hung around Tulsa for a couple years. And then I moved back to Dallas and was living with my brother. And I got a job at church. It's no longer there. It was one of those 80s mega churches. It was called Word of Faith.
Okay.
And it was kind of the stereotypical TV evangelist guy. His name was
Mm-hmm.
Robert Tilton.
Okay.
And I started off, I was working in the mailroom. And I had taken some classes when I lived in Tulsa. I did a little study about sound engineering and sound reinforcement and such. And so I kind of weaseled my way into doing that at Word of Faith. But now they had full-time professional people. They had kind of a big operation.
Mm-hmm.
But I would volunteer, and they had lots of services. They did concerts, lots of guest speakers, had a Bible school, and it was a big deal. And this was in the infancy of satellite, back when people had those big, like 10-foot dishes in their backyard,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and churches would buy these dishes, and they would get a signal from Word of Faith. They'd have Jerry Savelle would come preach there, or Norval Hayes, or some of these
Mm-hmm.
big time Pentecostal preachers which you couldn't get at your little church, in Montana, but you could see them over the satellite. But anyway, I ended up getting a job full time as a sound guy. So I did front of house and monitors and TV, and I just got a really good experience working on all that. And we had lots of big name bands coming. Russ Taff came through,
Okay.
Whiteheart came through,
Yeah.
and I know there was some others, big name groups that came. But it was cool to see them because they were all professional and just super talented and nice people. Um, but we had really, really good equipment. There was never any question, if you needed something, you got it.
Yeah.
And it's not like your average church. Like, you need a microphone? What do you need a microphone for? You know?
Yeah.
But so that was a great experience, and you know, lived in the Dallas Fort Worth area. Uh, got married. I have 4 kids. You know, they're all grown now. They're all between 23 and 30,
Okay.
and I have grandkids, and they live in Houston or Katy, around that
Mhm.
area.
Mhm.
And I've remarried since then. But anyway, yeah, I moved here 2001. Uh, it's pretty weird to move to Mississippi to get a job from Dallas, but that's what happened
So you came to Mississippi to
at
work there
Peavey.
at PV.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit about like you've said that you worked with the phone systems there.
I've been in telecommunications for
Okay.
30 plus years since I was 25. Um, they, uh, they didn't have, well, they had a person doing it, but she didn't know what she was doing. So the fellow that hired me, he needed some help in a bad way. And I came in and straightened it up and saved them tons and tons of money and made their phone system work better.
Well,
So,
well, tell me a little because you got my curiosity, and I don't want you to say anything you're not uncomfortable with about PV.
hmm
But
hmm
now that you know, I don't know much about the inner workings of PV. I know they're up right up the road from me, a couple
hmm
hours, and they are an institution here. Uh,
yep,
you know, Mississippi Music is going to carry a lot of PV stuff.
yep.
What was at my disposal growing up playing music? If you were in the gear, you're going to be buying a PV amp, sometimes a PV copy of a Strat or something like that to
Yeah,
get started. And
yeah.
all the sound stuff around here is PV.
hmm
And so they do have quite a huge footprint here, and I know internationally they do too. But tell me a little bit about what that's like and what it was like working there, and maybe your perspective from that.
Well, first of all, Hartley Peavey started his company, in the early 60s. And it was, we talk about boutique gear.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was. He was hand building amplifiers in his dad's music store. It was called PV Melody Music downtown
Mm-hmm.
in Meridian. And he just started, he wanted to be a rock and roll star, and then he figured out he couldn't play as well as he could build. And so people just started asking him to build, hey, can you build me an amplifier? Oh, by the way, can you build us a PA system?
Mm-hmm.
And then he started building PA systems. And I think that was probably the biggest part of his business starting off, and he just grew. And because he was making a decent product at a really good price, and it's it was an astronomical flight they took, and into the 80s into the 90s. Before I got here, I would hear stories that they were running, 3 shifts, and they had buildings and plants all over Meridian because they couldn't find one place big enough in town to
Mm-hmm.
put everything under one roof. So they just had to buy it where they could, and um, they've built some good stuff over the years, and they built some junk, and to this day that it's still the case. They still build some really good guitar amplifiers, and uh, and they built some crap too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that as far from a business standpoint, you had a pie that was being 5 or 6 pieces were being taken, right? It was Peavey and Gibson and Fender and companies like that. But now there's like 200 slices being taken out.
Yeah.
You got your Behringers and then everybody else like that, and that's gonna take it. That's gonna hurt anybody's business when you're having that much competition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of companies out there, a lot of boutique companies
Yep.
who are trying to build, and I think that they're trying to fill a void that a lot of the big companies, when they used to make, um, hand wired amps or something like that, they can't do that anymore and make money, and
Yeah, it's pretty
so
tough.
they get into making the PCB boards, and then okay, well, how can I make the PCB board cheaper, and how can I
Yep.
mass produce this, and then then you got guys, well, I need the reliability of a hand wired amp. I'm touring on the road. Most people don't need a hand wired amp, but
Nope.
there's that extreme case where somebody needs it. Well, there's somebody who's willing to build that, and so they have a little niche market. Um, so, but I don't know. I don't have any numbers, but I would think maybe the gear market is like pretty large at this point, maybe larger than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
And
I don't
there's
know.
definitely more pieces of the pie going out for sure.
Well, the PV part of the pie has been shrinking.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I'm part of that. The company when I got there was probably, I would say it was a good 500-600 people,
Hmm.
and just over time, dwindling down. And I think some of that, well, a lot of it's competition, but some of it might be the product PV's building is not as appealing to some people.
Yeah.
But it's kind of sad because they used to make really good guitars, during the 80s and 90s.
Hmm.
That's most of the guitars I have are guitars from that era. They were just really nice, and they're a great. I almost hate to say it because I don't want people going out and buying the guitar that I might be able to get for $200. But it's a real overlooked, underappreciated guitar. Um, Wolfgangs, Forenzas, all that. When you talk about PV making Strat copies, there's some really good ones out there. Telecopies,
Hmm. Yeah.
and then some other original designs. But
You
uh,
posted a video, a live video, not that you were doing, but I think you shared it not too long ago, back a few months
mhm,
ago, that caught my attention, and I joined in and watched it. And they were going through the PV museum, and they were uh, showing some of Hartley Peavy's first amplifiers that he made, and these things they look like the closest thing, like grill wise and everything, to
yeah,
a Fender of that era, but it had his own
mhm,
writing, and it looked very much like what you would see a boutique amp today.
yeah,
Trying to do a blackface copy, and
yeah.
I remember, I don't know, what his claim to fame eventually was, but I know that Leonard Skinner early on were using PV amps.
That's all they used.
Yeah, and actually, I believe Gary Rosington still, last I checked, last I heard, was still using his PV amp that was in the plane crash. I mean, the thing survived the plane crash,
Mm,
and was using that back. I don't know, read a magazine article where he was using that still, and that's very key to their sound. Now, I know that a lot of those amplifiers kind of was after that Marshall Plexi flavor
mhm.
a little bit, and it was just kind of his take on it, and but a lot of interesting stuff. Now, where I'm most familiar with PV growing up is not necessarily the bedroom amplifiers or the guitars, but I think everybody uh, in my generation growing up played through one of those 4-channel PA heads with the column speakers. A lot of times that was the only PA available, especially in
Oh man,
churches.
things are dreadful.
Yeah, not a lot
The
of
original
control.
line, the original line array.
Yeah, yeah, and but those things could honk. I mean, you could pump some volume out of
Yeah,
those, and good for the weekend warrior band.
yeah.
They could just
The video you were talking about, they were actually at the PV headquarters. There is a PV museum that
okay.
back in the day, they had it open and had all that memorabilia, but the traffic just slowed down so much that they don't have it open anymore.
Hmm.
The PV headquarters was actually the building I worked at, and it's about a half a mile from my house here. Uh, they had brought some of those items over from the museum and put them out in the display area in the foyer, what they call the fishbowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I personally, I don't really like Hartley Peavy. I think he's a bit of an old curmudgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and but I got to hand it to him. He built a company, so you know, I would never take that away from a guy.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't. I mean, I know that there was a massive layoffs back a few
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah.
and was it due to the fact that they were just offshoring all the aspects of the company?
Well, I can't say for certain what it looked like. Um, they determined is just business. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
cost of doing business was we can get it built in China for a certain amount of money versus what it's costing us to have the doors open here and pay people and have the machines running, and the maintenance and the all the support that goes with it. And so they just found that they could get it done cheaper in China.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know Harley Peavy did not want to do that. He had always prided himself on, um, building the product in America and having local people do it. And, um, Peavy is a big part of this community.
Yeah.
But it just, you can't compete with the Behringers and, well, everybody builds their stuff, and almost everybody,
Mm-hmm.
in that market space, they're building their things over there, and you can't compete like that.
Yeah. Well, I've
Not if you're going to
seen.
build, not if you're going to build the same kind of product, unless you're building uh, $5,000 guitars,
Mm-hmm.
which PV doesn't do. So
Yeah.
uh,
Well, that wasn't their market really. It was
nope,
the
no,
working musician.
exactly. That was always the deal. The closest they ever came to it, I think, was when they bought Buddha,
Mm-hmm.
and they were building those Buddha amps. I would walk by all the time and talk to the lady that was out there. And in fact, I saw her at church the other day. She was it was this lady, and she hand wired, did
Oh
all the
wow.
soldering, and the whole thing. Yeah,
Now
those are
those I did not know that they owned Buddha, but that was
yep,
Jeff Bober originally
yep,
owned that, and
yep.
great. I've read his articles, where he talks about how to soup up a Fender amp, and really brilliant guy.
Yep,
That was a really good amp to have in the
that's a great amp.
portfolio. Yeah,
Sure, yeah.
I actually saw one of those on for sale on Craigslist last week, and I haven't. Is in Gulfport or something. The guy wanted like
Hmm.
$900 for a single channel
Nine
Buddha
hundred
amp.
dollars.
Yeah,
Wow,
and I
that's a
thought,
steal.
man, that's a great amp. But I mean,
Hmm.
yeah,
But I'll tell you, the amps that they make, the classics and the 5150 and
hmm
what are they don't make the triple X anymore. Those are all pretty similar. But those types of big amps, those are good amps.
yeah, yeah. I had a not too long ago. I picked up a PV Supreme, which is
Hmm.
solid state, but it was a 100 watt
Hmm.
head. And I picked it up in pawn shop. The guy was like, this isn't working, but I knew the guy, and he was like, you can, if you just want to buy it for real cheap, see if you can get it working, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a shot at it. And
That's the one
so,
that's got the reversible plate on the
yeah,
face of it.
yeah, it
Yeah.
had like tribal art, like
Yep.
tattoo art, um,
Yep.
on the front, and it. I took the thing apart, and trying to clean the chassis out and everything, seeing if I could even find a problem. I couldn't find a problem, and what it was, and this is very typical of PV amps I found. It's just the input jacks get so like dirty that
Hmm.
they don't pass a signal. They start doing weird stuff, and I literally took the oxit and sprayed in there several
Hmm.
times, and then took an instrument cable and went in and out, and bam, back to life.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's kind of PVs are known for, you can do simple stuff like that and get them back to
Hmm.
life.
Yep.
And it was a great sounding amp. I sold it to a guy here locally who was he was looking to add a second amp so he could start playing stereo. And it was a
Okay.
good loud amp, and
Yeah.
he loved it. Just a clean
Yeah.
platform.
The only problem I think that I see in that lineup, they have so many of those big amps, that most people are going away from the giant amplifiers.
Yes, yes.
I know I don't have one. I got a 112 cabinet with a small amplifier. It's just you don't need it anymore. You
That
don't your guitar rig doesn't have to be a PA system anymore like the old days.
no, and that's why I I spent a period a few years ago chasing down vintage amps, and I owned
Mm.
a Super Reverb, couple Basemans, helped a friend of mine get a Silverface Twin up and going again, and I love those amps. I just have such a soft place in my heart for them,
Hmm.
but what it comes
How
down
about your
to,
back?
yeah, they hurt your back. It's hard for me to haul around. I drive a compact car, and it's hard for me to even haul them around. But the thing is, they're just too loud.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to, go in the sanctuary of my church and crank up a twin reverb
Hmm.
and play like that. It's fun, but I
But you don't need
can't
it
get away
anymore.
with that.
Yep.
And so that is one major shift in the gear, and just practicality. You can't get away with playing that loud anymore, and
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah. We
relegated to
use
playing my
we use
Blues
in
Junior
ears.
now. Do you?
Yeah, we use in ears. So my amp sits off the stage. But the speaker cabinet sits on the floor. I got it mic'd, but I run it really pretty low volume.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a couple of the guys play direct, you know, and got the cage. The drums are in a cage and the whole thing, and we just try to keep everything quiet as possible and do it in the ears.
Yeah, yeah, and
Hard to do that with bass players though.
yeah, yeah, it is, and it's hard for the bass players to enjoy playing that way too.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, I went and played, uh, filled in for a friend of mine, and he had his dad's rig. His dad played bass for him,
Hmm.
and I got to go to fill in at this church, and his rig was a Ampeg SVT with the 8 speakers.
That's funny.
Is it six? Is it 610s or 810s? I can't remember,
I don't
but
know, but they're
but
big.
it shook the house down, and it's like this little small sanctuary, and it was so much fun though to play that way, because you couldn't get away with that in most churches anymore.
That's funny because we visited a Church of God in Natchez
Hmm.
this past weekend. Natchez is southwest Mississippi,
Yeah, yeah.
right there at well, it's on the Mississippi River. And but yeah, that bass player, I don't know what I really didn't see his rig, but I sure did hear it. It was so freaking loud, man. I was like, God, dude, could hardly is you have the song service and then you're supposed to shake hands and say hi to everybody. I was like, people are yelling in my ear. What? I can't
Yeah,
I can't hear what your name is.
but that's just
Anyway,
the change in the, going back to the sound system thing. There are a lot of churches are getting more than adequate sound systems
oh yeah.
now, and it's no need to amplify yourself to that level.
Well, this church hadn't yet.
Yeah, hadn't made that leap yet.
No, they were behind a few years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go from there into talking about. I know that you play uh, at your church quite
Hmm.
often, and let's talk about that for a minute.
Every Yeah, I've always played at church. I've never played any secular anything.
Hmm.
Never ever. I never wanted to. I didn't want to give myself to that. Um, I've always dedicated my playing to the Lord, and so that's the way it is. I play 2 or 3 times a week, I mean, tonight we were my wife plays piano, so we were rehearsing for our service tomorrow night, and I write all the charts that we do, which is time consuming, but I'm so picky about it that I like to have my own charts, make sure they're accurate. But there's a lot of bad charts out there, aren't there?
Yes.
Whew. And YouTube videos of people playing songs that are playing the wrong. Oh my gosh, they're so bad.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I know one
But
thing
yeah.
that I did when I came in to lead worship at my church is it was kind of it was a throw your arrangements away.
Hmm.
We're gonna get new arrangements because everybody's
Okay.
gonna get the same. Everybody's gonna be
Ah.
reading from the same page and then the same key,
Oh,
and
you're a
and
man after my own heart.
yeah, and we're not gonna live with this confusion of let's
Yep.
dig out of the organ bench some
Hmm.
arrangement. Oh, this is in the right key. This is the song. No, that's not the same arrangement.
Hmm.
We're all gonna play the same thing. Try to play the same thing,
Yeah, I like that.
and it's just a way. I think it's now I don't write my own charts anymore. I
Hmm.
just basically I pick a chart that I like, and you know it's too time consuming, and
Well, I do it because I want to see a good chart and I want us to all be on the same page. But it
mhm.
also helps me learn the song
Yeah,
because you got to sit there and break it down.
yeah, absolutely. One of the best ways to learn the ins and outs of the song is actually sit down and write it.
Yeah. And I tell you one thing I'm really bad at though is learning guitar riffs.
Okay.
Uh, I can play a decent riff, but to have to learn everybody else's riffs, it's hard on me.
Yeah.
But
Well.
90% of the songs we do, it's the same chord progression and it's the same four chords, right? It's one, four,
Mhm.
five, and six. And so the thing that's going to set song A apart from song B many times is a signature riff,
Yeah.
either a piano or guitar. Uh, and so it really is necessary to learn it. And most of the time I do, but
Yeah.
sometimes I don't.
I know. Most of the time I'm just playing rhythm and leading, but there was a point last summer where I went and played away at a camp for a week, and I knew some of the songs, but I didn't know a lot of the material. And I'm handed this massive, you know, learn these 15 songs in a couple days, and I probably you might agree with me on this is a lot of the praise and worship stuff in that style, like the newer stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it almost all sounds the same, and it was hard for me to remember. I've never played this stuff, and here I am, like, got a dozen songs or more than a dozen songs, and it just sounded like a sea of the same stuff in different
It
keys.
it can if you don't bring out the signature parts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And that
it was just it.
well,
It's hard to get those riffs down deep down in you when the chord
yeah,
progressions are the same. It
yeah.
is.
Well, and when I'm writing my charts, a lot of times I'll go ahead and tab out those guitar parts because we'll do the song and then it'll be 3 weeks before we do it again,
Hmm.
and I'm having to go back and remember how the heck did I play that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, I do it for the other guitar players too, the younger guys. Some of them have pretty good ears, much better than mine, but I think it always helps to go ahead and have that tab there.
Yeah, that's a good point of reference.
Yeah.
And it's such a different. I appreciate it and I enjoy listening to it. Even for me, when I got to hold down the leads, I come from such a blues guitarist perspective
Hmm.
that it's kind of it's just different, and it's trying to the game changes every so many years, and I know if I'm gonna stay relevant and be able to tackle the new songs, I gotta learn to do all that.
Oh, I got a funny story about that. So, uh, 6 years ago or
Hmm.
so, when Stacy Clearman came to be the worship leader at our church,
Okay.
And he was like, okay, we're going to do this rehearsal before the first time we play, And I was up there doing what I always did, which was fly by the seat of my pants, and no real structure. And he goes,
Mm-hmm.
okay, do you have a delay pedal? And I said, I think so. I never used delay ever in 30 some years of playing guitar, 30 plus years. He goes, well, you're going to need to get a delay pedal and you're going to have to get a tap tempo because this song is going to require that. And you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have to learn how to play this riff. And I was like, wow, talk about a talk about a game changer. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I did. And now, over the years I've gotten used to it and I really love it.
Yeah.
Uh, so much so that I've been through tons of delay pedals trying to get the right combination.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. I've noticed, you're posting in a lot of the forums and stuff. Like, you have a pretty massive board. At least what I've seen, it would be different
Mm.
at the moment. But kind of talk about your journey there. From what do you do?
Yeah. Uh, it's been a journey, all right. Well, for a while I was using multi effects
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like I had a Boss GT8, and I've always had some Zoom pedals around, which I like them, but um, it's not exactly what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I started. It's probably five. Well, it was just right about the time Stacy came. I started building a pedal board, and just you you have to buy and sell a lot of stuff to find the one that the right overdrive pedal and the right delay pedal, and then sometimes you'll buy a pedal and it doesn't work with the other pedals that you have. It's a real things have to work together. And I'm still my pedal board's out there in my shop right now. I'm fixing to take it apart and put it back together again for the I don't know 40 or 50th time. Uh, as far as I had a Nova delay for a long time, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I went from that to using three Boss DD7s,
Okay.
and I had a external tap tempo. Those have external tap tempo, so I bought a JHS box where you buy a pedal and then you plug it into the box and then it splits the signal out to the DD7s
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you know uh, delayed pedal has external tap tempo on it, and that worked pretty good, uh, but it wasn't the answer. And I sold those and I bought a DD500.
Okay.
That was 4 or 5 months ago,
Okay. Those are
and
interesting. I haven't played one, but I'd love
yeah,
to.
it's good. It's good. I think there's so much hype about it though. It's like the guys that, or I think you call them fanboys, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are really into them. They want them to be the Strymon timeline killer so bad
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of oversell what it'll do,
Mm-hmm.
and it wouldn't do the thing I wanted it to do. So I ended up selling it, and I went back to just using a zoom pedal as a delay.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm fixing to put a um, Line 6 M5 on my
Okay.
board.
Okay.
The thing is, I use a switching system. I actually have two switchers. They were made by a company called G Lab, and it was branded by Rivera. You're familiar with Rivera
Yes.
amps?
Yes.
And I just happened to cross it on Reverb several years ago. And what I do, I run all my drive pedals in the first switcher. They've got 4 loops on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come out of that to a volume pedal and into a noise gate.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go into the second switcher, and that's going to have all my delays and reverbs on it. And that way, when I'm moving my volume up and down, the the delay and reverb is always going to come after, and the trails will stay out there.
Okay.
And I found that works best for me. But these two switchers have MIDI in them,
Okay.
so I thought, well, I should take advantage of that. So with an M5, what I'm going to do is hook it up to the MIDI, and it has all these different delays built into it, delay models.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say for my clean, for my clean, I want two different kinds of delays. And so I'll set up the MIDI to do that. And then for my crunchy sound, I want a certain delay. And for my lead sound, the high gain deal, I want a different delay. And then for my ambient uh, thing, which I use a Seraphim for that. You familiar with that? Your
Yes.
neighbor Seraphim?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great pedal. But and it works good by itself, but it works even better if you stick a delay in front of it, with a high mix and a lot of repeats.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that. You can do a pretty good pad with that, with the volume pedal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I'm at on that, and I'm still playing with some different overdrive pedals. I really like Wampler, but hadn't been in my budget lately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Since I've got laid off from Peavey, I was out of work for a while, and it kind of cut into my guitar habit a little bit.
Yeah, and
But
that's the moment when it really comes down to, you know, am I gonna chase these things for that one little feature that's just a little bit
yeah,
better than the other, or am I gonna rip my board down to what's the most important? And I've seen the guys. Are you familiar with the Gear Slum?
hmm
They they went through this phase where it was like death to tone was the hashtag, and it was like I'm gonna rip my board down to just the absolute bare minimum. And I know I've come to that point in frustration because I built up a board not as massive as you're even talking about, but I built up a board and I got so frustrated with, oh well, I have this on my board but I'm not really using it. Why am I lugging around this huge board that barely fits in the back of my cord with my amp, back in the back seat of my car with my amp, when I could, strip it down. And so lately, I've been such a minimalist lately. It's kind of like when I first started playing, like just trying to almost go as much guitar straight to amp as I can.
yeah,
And I'm doing like my telly. And for church, when I'm just playing rhythm, a lot of times I'm just dialing in a edge of breakup tone on my Blues Junior, and I don't have to get that loud to do it.
hmm
And then I'm drenching it in the spring reverb pretty heavy.
hmm
And then I might bring in a delay pedal, or one of the tricks I really like is to take my spring reverb and have it or just a good baseline sound on my amp. And then I have another reverb pedal that I'll throw like a different type of reverb in my chain. And if I want to get like really ambient, washy sounds for like a particular song or something, or I can switch the reverb off of my amp and go to that. But I like kind of a modulated or sometimes a plate reverb for something different.
I'm I'm expecting Christopher Walken to come in at any moment and go, "What I need is more reverb."
Yeah. Yeah, and I just love reverb and just getting an amp
Apparently,
that is set at the right gain stage.
yeah.
And I think the biggest problem that I had for a while, especially with tube amps, is I was getting ones that were way too loud that I can never get up into that sweet spot.
Mm.
And I was having to use, like 3 or 4 different gain stages of drives. And one of the things I like about like the smaller, 15 watt amp is that I can take my master volume and bring it down and put my channel volume up just to where I can get a little bit of crunch and it's not so loud. And that's basically my dirt pedal right there. So I don't know. I've just been changing so much lately to where yes, I enjoy a good ambient sound, but I want to. I don't know. I've just kind of become a minimalist lately. Um,
Yep. Every time I try to do that, I end up going back and
yeah,
buying more pedals.
yeah.
Can't do it.
Now I do. I have a bad habit. Like if I go to the pawn shop or something, if I
Yeah.
see a pedal, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm buying it.
Yeah, I see you're always selling something,
Yeah, I just
which means you're always buying something.
I'm always buying something, and it's like I don't ever buy anything I wouldn't keep if I had to.
Yeah.
But like I want to try everything out I can, and
Hmm.
I can't really try that out in the store.
Nope.
So even if I
It,
own
it
it
never,
briefly,
yeah,
yeah,
it never sounds the same until you, not only do you put it on your pedal board, but you have to be playing live
yeah,
in the moment. That's when it sounds the way it's going to sound, you know.
yeah, and so okay, $30 for this cheap drive pedal or fifty
Hmm.
dollars here, and I mean I want to try it all.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about tube amps. I'm a bit of a, I don't know what the word is. I've used solid state amps
Mm-hmm.
forever. I've never, no, I did own a Marshall tube amp at one time in the
Okay.
early 80s, but I didn't even care if it was tube. It didn't matter to me
Mm-hmm.
because, and I've just never really played loud. And that's kind of the way my pedal board works, is that it has to produce all the sound. My amplifier is just a clean palette, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why I use a Crate Power Block amp. It's just a D class
Mm-hmm.
amplifier, so nothing special. And so all of my tone, except for what comes out of my fingers, right?
Fingers.
Yeah,
The tone is in the fingers.
tone is in the finger. Yeah, that's get me started. But yeah, all my drive stages they come from pedals and
Yeah.
um,
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I back it up. I wasn't criticizing that. What I was saying is,
mhm,
I've been there where I've tried to, get all those
right,
gain stages, and I don't know. For me, I don't like to think about a lot when I'm playing, so
right.
playing the song, and so
Well, yeah, if
I've
you're
just
having to
backed away
sing,
from that. Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Well, most of the time I'm just playing acoustic, anyways.
yeah,
So, um, the only reason I even keep a semblance of a rig together is for that rare opportunity where I get a call. Hey, can you fill in? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's really the only reason I even keep that rig
hmm.
is for that moment to okay, yeah, I want to go play electric guitar.
I was just remembering something. Have you gone back and listened to your first podcast?
Yes, it's terrible, isn't it?
It really was. You sounded like you were hiding in a room with
Yeah,
a blanket over your
yeah.
head, like I don't want anybody to hear me.
I should have gone back and I interviewed my cousin, and he was like, "Do you want to just go back and record this?" No, no, no. I thought it was so good. The content was good,
Yes,
but the
the energy was not there.
yeah, and so I just it took me I don't know. I guess the last probably 5 or 6 weeks it's been okay.
Yeah.
But it has just
Well,
been
you got to get your song together. You see, that's gonna your intro
got to get
song
my
is gonna
intro
make it
song
all.
together.
Yeah, that's gonna make it pop when you get
Yeah,
your intro song.
and it's funny because I wrote a jingle for another show I was a guest on, and I was wondering why haven't I done that? Well, I haven't pushed myself to do it, obviously.
Think how funny that is. You wrote a jingle for their song, but not for your
I know it's just
for their show, but
it's
not.
absurd,
Yeah,
but
come on, man.
I've spent so much energy trying to get this podcast like
Yes.
sounding good and knock the kinks out that I haven't had the time. I don't know.
Wow.
I knew nothing about podcasting,
Yes.
and like if you go back and you listen to that first episode, I could not for the life of me figure out why I was echoing and you kept hearing my voice trailing behind the other guys. Well, I found out very quick, like after a lot of research, is because none of us were wearing headphones,
Right.
and so he was back feeding into his track was backfeeding from
Yes,
mine, and it was just a
I heard
mess.
that.
It was a
I was
mess.
listening. I was listening to it today. I go, put some headphones on, dude.
Yeah, I had no idea that it worked that way, and
Yeah,
also I had this mentality that like, oh well, I'm just getting started. This can't cost me a lot of money. I got to find the absolute free way to do this, and like I
yeah.
realized, no, I need to invest, a few dollars here in some areas, um, and
I was I was gonna do a podcast.
where you?
Yeah, there was a young guy that I used to work with at Peavey,
Mm-hmm.
and we were like opposites, right? Because so I'm a baby boomer, uh, conservative Christian, you know, Reaganite,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like millennial, liberal, agnostic,
Mm-hmm.
and real opposite. But we got along great because we had. You may see me write about it sometimes on Facebook. I'm really, really big on having candor, intelligence, and goodwill.
Uh-huh.
And if you have those things in a conversation, you can talk to anybody about anything.
Mm-hmm.
The goodwill is probably the biggest part of it. And because when people, you start having a difference of opinion and you start putting walls up and attacking each other and getting defensive and all that,
Mm-hmm.
that's, we've circled back to the start of the conversation, I think, but you're not going anywhere in that conversation.
Right.
And he and we just didn't allow that to happen. And we had very different points of view, but uh, our take on it was more like, well, what do you think about, why do you see it that way? And we would question each other in a real constructive way. We were going to do a podcast, and he ended up moving to Jackson, so we didn't do it. And
Yeah. Well, that is a theme I've heard come up several times among
mm,
like Josh Marmon with Common Grounds podcast. I had him as a
okay,
guest on this show, and I've been a guest on his show.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, check it out. If you at all like what I do, you'll like what he
Hmm.
does because we
Cool.
have a very similar format.
Hmm.
Except he talks a little bit about gear and music, but
Hmm.
his thing is about coffee.
Okay.
And it's called Common Grounds, and his whole thing is finding
Uh,
finding common ground with people who are different than
okay.
you. And he has some very interesting guests.
Well,
But
that's good.
yeah, so plug for my buddy Josh.
Well, I
But
know his name from 60 Cycle Hum, right?
yeah, he's very active there, and
Yeah.
he. But that's one of the things that we talked about is you don't have to agree with anybody, but like, and he
Hmm.
always asks this question in his show, what what can you do to find common ground with people who don't necessarily see eye to
Hmm.
eye with
Hmm.
the way you think or your worldview. And it's like we
Yeah.
all have something, and of course it all centers around, okay, well, coffee is our common ground. We're going to talk about coffee, and then but we're going to get off into some of
Hmm.
these other things, and that's kind of but music has been that for me.
Okay.
It's a very it's kind of my bridge into a lot of different worlds, different different people's points of views, and it's always well, I may not agree with you politically or religiously, but
Hmm.
I can talk about music all day long, and through that it builds a rapport that, hey, I'm not out here to slam you, I'm not out here
Hmm.
to take you down, or
I
um,
saw a post on Facebook last night, and it was a friend of mine from Texas,
mm-hmm,
and he's a liberal guy, and he liked this post that I wasn't even a part of.
mm-hmm,
And it was a picture of Jimmy Carter,
okay,
and it was like, here's Jimmy Carter, he's being a good Christian, and all these other so-called Christians hate him, and all
mm-hmm,
the so-called Christians was me, right? Not
okay,
me personally, but
right,
but
right,
me as a white Southern conservative or whatever the stereotype is. Well, you can throw in homophobe, racist, and all those other things that some people say that we are or I am. That was not true. And and I rarely. will comment on a post that I'm not directly related to, you know?
Mm-hmm. No dog in the fight.
Not even that. Well, yeah, it's more like uh, I'm not friends with the person who initiated the post.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I hate it when people jump into I've had people jump into something. I don't know who they are, and they start arguing with me. And I'm like, dude, who are you?
Yeah.
Why are you busting my chops? And but I did have to say, and I said it in a really nice way. I said, uh, really, did you? Because he liked what they said. I said, was it that you liked the part where you're commending Jimmy Carter for putting some action to his faith? Well, that's good. I appreciate that too.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with Jimmy Carter ideologically on things. Or was it that you liked that the person who posted it was bashing the, in quotes, so-called Christians?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of called him out on it in a nice way. I haven't heard back from him. Uh, but have you ever heard Dave Rubin?
Dave Rubin?
Yep.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
You should definitely check him out because
Okay.
he's atheist, homosexual, liberal.
Okay.
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 And but very has a very good show. He's very open-minded, very nice, gets along. He interviews liberals and conservatives, and just from Dennis Prager to Larry Elder to uh, that's the guy that wrote Scott Adams that wrote Dilbert, right?
Okay.
People like that. He interviews people like that, and he's like, "Gosh, we can disagree on a subject, but not be so darn disagreeable."
Yeah,
And
that's the downside to social media. I think is that you get in these forums and people you don't really know, they start going back and forth, and
hmm
it's not like we were sitting down having a conversation and keeping our cool about it
hmm
like in real life, where at the end of the day, yeah, you can walk out of here and be friends, but it's
yeah.
kind of like, no, everybody, all those inhibitions go out the door. And people,
The anonymity of the internet,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
makes people very brave sometimes.
yeah, keyboard warriors, so to
Yeah.
speak. And but it's not just, I found it's not just those the guy who's going to be passionate in those areas are going to be passionate talking about gear too, and maybe do the same tactics sometimes. So it's really, it's more of a, can you get along with people, can you
hmm
make your point but not go on the attacking everybody. And that's where this needs to, I guess, is it, I would encourage people to be civil
hmm
in their interactions with people, because it doesn't we all have our story, we all have our worldview, we all have a reason why we believe the way we do, but
hmm
there's no reason to take people down
Nope.
over having a different point of view.
Yeah. If it's theological, then if you have a different take on it, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to tell you what I think,
Mm-hmm.
and from a Christian point of view, if God hasn't opened your eyes and revealed that to you, then you're not ready yet anyway, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's that's the thing, is Christians have to expect that people who aren't Christians aren't gonna agree with them. In the
no,
same
what do you?
way non-Christians have to think, well, Christians aren't going to think exactly the way I'm thinking either.
True.
That it's both sides, and obviously, we both have the we're both Christians, and so we're going to see things a little bit different than a non-Christian would.
Yes.
But it's because it's part of our faith, and something
Right.
that's part of us. But that doesn't mean that we hate people who think different than us. Hopefully, I
Nope.
mean, I'm can't speak for you, but I know that's something I'm very intentional, is I'm not gonna hate people that think
No, and
differently than me.
that's why I kind of joked about it earlier. You get the stereotype of the homophobe,
Yeah,
racist, and just all those things. And it's just, gosh, yeah, I grew out of that.
yeah, yeah.
When I was a little kid, I was a racist because I grew up in a home of racism.
Hmm.
But you mature either just civilly or, in my case, that plus having a biblical understanding that that's a wrong position. I don't hate homosexuals. I
Right,
don't hate transgender people. I don't hate feminists. I don't hate any of them. I just disagree. That's all.
right, right.
And
Yeah, I mean, it's. Um, I know there's a lot of times. I'm going to talk about being Southern here for a minute, since we're two
oof.
Southerners. But there is a stereotype that
Yep.
yes, I may have the accent, but that doesn't
Mm,
mean that I'm like every Southerner that you've read about or, um, heard
mm,
about. I hope that what I do speaks more highly than that of, where I'm
yeah.
from. And yeah, there's some idiot that lives here and out in the country that you know of who's
Oh yeah.
epitomizes every bit of that. I mean, yeah,
Yep.
but that's
I've
not
met them.
me. That's not me, and that's not you. And it's just trying to run away from those stereotypes. Yeah, I can't change the way I sound when I talk, but
Yeah.
that's not
Uh,
me.
it, it was interesting when I moved here because I had I have really had no idea what to expect,
Hmm.
except for I had seen the movie Mississippi Burning. So I had I literally thought it was going to be a race riot 24/7.
Yeah.
And in fact, I drove into town to get the motel where I was going to stay at the microtel here,
Hmm.
and to start working at Peavy. And went to the gas station and got out, and there was this black lady there getting gas. I thought, is she going to jump me? You know, and it was just a terrible stereotype. I did because I just didn't grow up around a lot of black people.
Hmm.
But here it's 50-50, man. At least. If not many situations I find myself in the city of Meridian, like I work for the school district as an electronics technician. I think it's about 90% black
Hmm.
teachers and students, and but I don't see that day to day. I see lots of people getting along with each other. I see uh, if you don't make it an issue, it's not an issue.
Hmm.
And I have found I used to try to convince the black people I was around I wasn't a racist, and I figured out that they had already figured me out, and they knew
Hmm.
I wasn't, and I didn't have to prove it. I just had to treat them the way I would treat anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Treat my black friends the way I treat my white friends, and not make a big deal out of it.
Yeah. I
And
I know exactly what you mean. I remember one time,
yeah,
I was working, straight out of college, and I graduated right in the when the bubble bust on the whole college thing, and I was, having trouble finding good jobs. I didn't have trouble finding a job, and I
Southern
was,
Miss.
yeah, I went to Southern Miss,
Mm-hmm.
and graduated 2007. And I think just a few months later, the bubble burst.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working, in some restaurant work. And I was in one of the jobs I was working. And
Hooters.
no, I was working at Crystals in the management program
Oh yeah.
on Terry Road in Jackson, Mississippi,
Yeah.
in South Jackson. I was training there, and I was the only white guy
Mm-hmm.
working there, and I stood out like a sore thumb. And it was a very good experience, I think, for me
Yes.
to understand what it's like to be the minority. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
one day, there was this young man that was sharing a story with me that was working there, and he told me how much he hated white people,
Mm-hmm.
and but he's telling a white guy how much he hates white people, And he goes on to tell a story about
Yeah, but
how
he trusted you though,
he
right?
trusted me, yeah. And he goes on to
Yeah.
say that, he saw his brother snatched up by some redneck dude who drove through South Jackson there and dragged behind the car and killed.
Mm.
And he goes on to tell me this, horrible story. And he said, "That's why I hate white people." And I said, "Well, I wouldn't ever dream of doing that to anybody, much less, picking a black person out to do that to." I mean, and I said, not all white people are like that. And from then on, like, he and a few of the other guys were like, man, you black, you're black, you're one of us. And it was, of course I'm not black. I mean, I'm white. I sound as white as possible, but
Yes.
they trusted me because they saw, and you let it speak for yourself that no, I'm not a racist. I'm not gonna act racist. And that's the same thing you're talking about. You get along perfectly with the people you work with, even though you're the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. It's important. That we don't live in 1950s America anymore, where a lot of the attitudes that I know even like my grandparents had about race and culture, that America doesn't exist anymore.
No, not the way it did.
Mm-mm.
I used to deliver pizza. I worked at Pizza Hut. And I was the only white guy at the Pizza Hut, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was out delivering one day, and this lady was right in the middle of Meridian, kind of where the majority black neighborhood, and then it starts to get a little whiter,
Yeah.
you know. And she looked all worried, and I was at the stop sign. And she comes over. She's like waving, flagging me down. I rolled my window down, can I help you? And she's looking around like somebody's chasing her. I said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She goes, "Can I use your phone?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Sure, here." And she's looking around, she's dialing, and I had just watched a documentary about Medgar Evers.
Yeah.
Of course, you know who that is.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Whistle. Yeah.
so my heart was a little sensitive to it. And I said, "Seriously, are you okay?" She goes, "Well, I don't know. I'm walking through this white neighborhood." I was like, and then I realized she was older than me. She was probably 60 plus,
Yeah.
and I had to put myself in her shoes. What she at one time, that neighborhood was the white neighborhood, and it probably was dangerous. You know,
Mm.
20, 30, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
probably would have been dangerous, but now it wasn't. But man, she was still living under that. And felt so bad for her, but I helped her out, and
Yeah. I
I
found that the
assured her
older.
nobody was going to shoot her walking down the street.
Yeah. I found that the older people in Mississippi, white or black, a lot of times
Hmm.
have these views that it's kind of like, no, that's it. Things have changed. Um,
Yeah.
I know that I went from living here on the coast to living in central Mississippi, where there is a lot of racial tension.
Hmm.
And I worked with you worked at Waffle House. I worked at uh, Crystals. Went on to work at
Man,
Pepsi.
you've had some awesome jobs.
Yeah, some terrible jobs. And it was very, very, very mixed workplace,
Right.
even at Pepsi. And then I just think that's part of my journey. But like I come to be youth pastor at a church where we're a predominantly white church, but
Hmm.
uh, the majority of our youth group is African American.
Hmm.
And I found that's a very interesting. It's very interesting how, okay, well, I can see where and that background. If I wouldn't have had that background, I wouldn't maybe know how to relate as much. And so it's just interesting. But Mississippi is changing
Oh yeah.
a lot, and it's not the Mississippi it was. Yeah, there's those crazy people out there still. I mean, this crazy white supremacists,
They're everywhere
backwards
though.
thinking people. Yeah, they're all over this nation. They're not just in
Listen,
Mississippi.
there's a lot of dudes wearing really nice suits who are bigger racists than any redneck around here.
Hmm.
And the thing is, they got more ability to be racist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
They got more power and they can shove people down a lot easier than just a regular dude around here can.
sure. And I found in other parts of the country, it may not even be the white and black problem. Where
It's more,
it's more okay, white and Hispanic or other races, and it's the same problems but just manifested differently.
yeah.
And
See, I
so,
grew up in Texas with lots of Hispanic people,
yeah,
and we got along great.
yeah,
Just like
yeah,
my Mexican friend, So
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. And that's the
Yeah.
thing is, every generation has its problems. I want to say it's cultural sins
Hmm.
that we all struggle with, and it's easy to go back and talk about my grandparents' generation and talk about, well, y'all were racist, y'all did this, and this,
Hmm.
but then there's other areas where I see our generation, our modern day, struggling in that they didn't in some areas. So
Hmm.
every generation has
Oh
its
yeah.
problems,
Yep.
and we just gotta learn to if we say, like, okay, if I'm a Christian, then you gotta learn what that means and put that into action. If
Yep.
you're gonna put that label on yourself, you're gonna be held to a little bit higher level of scrutiny,
Yep.
and so you gotta be prepared for that. And okay, if you're gonna call yourself that, then let's do what it takes to be called one. And so. Well, that's some heavy, interesting stuff, Richard. You kind of pulled out of me,
Yeah, sure.
but
Is this the longest interview you've ever done?
I think so. I think it's been the longest one. But
It's pretty long.
but like you said, neither one of us have to be the general manager of the universe.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So
I gotta be the general manager of me.
that's it.
It's like when I went to Bible school,
Hmm.
people would get into these little arguments: pre-trib rapture, post-trib rapture. Should women be pastors? They'd have all these little things going on, and
Hmm.
I got so tired of it. It wasn't bad, nobody got in fights over it, but I just determined I need to know how to get up in the morning and put my pants on and go out and act right.
Hmm.
And that's what I determined to do. So I, get up in the morning and pray. That's how I get myself calibrated, and do pay attention to the Word and try to walk in the Spirit, and be a decent person to people around me, and that's the best you can do right there.
It
Try
is.
to
It
try to
is.
try to honor God with the way you live.
That's it. None of us are gonna be perfect. We all have our areas.
Oh boy.
We need to improve in, and so uh just gotta be true to ourselves and love God, love people, and
Hmm.
just, I mean, if we're gonna put that label on ourselves,
Yep.
that's what we're supposed to do.
Okay.
Well,
And
interesting.
write a jingle
Write a jing.
ASAP.
I need to do that for sure. Thanks for that push. Well,
Yeah.
this has been a very interesting conversation. I could keep going, but I think we're going to take it for a landing.
Yep.
And thank you, Richard, for joining. And this is pretty late. This is probably the latest I've podcast. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity to catch up with you and have you on the show.
Mm-hmm. Oh, former presidential candidate.
Former presidential candidate. Well, I
You
hope
can't
you'll run
pass that
again
up.
next election cycle.
Depends on who's running, but I may just, for the fun of it anyhow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Richard. I think our listeners are going to enjoy this, and
If they're still in it this long,
if they're still in it this long. So,
God bless you.
you too, man. All right.
All right, buddy. Have a good night.
You too. Later.
Bye.
Bye.